I get that question all the time, how did you find out? How did you know you're so young? And I was young because I was 32 years old when I was diagnosed. My name is Nicole Fruin. I'm 34 years old and I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm a radio host and I'm also a breast cancer survivor. So it's kind of strange how I was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. I get that question all the time, how did you find out? How did you know you're so young? And I was young because I was 32 years old when I was diagnosed. And I found out because of my radio show. And it was Breast Cancer Awareness Month. October, as you know, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And we were raising money for our local nonprofit organization. And we decided, hey, maybe I should do it, get a mammogram so I could talk about it on the air, because there's always so many people talking about what a mammogram is like. Like, is it painful? Does it hurt? There's a lot of things out there, and people really don't know. You only know until you do it yourself. So I decided I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna talk about it. So I decided to go in, get my mammogram, thinking nothing of it, and on my way out, the radiologist stops me and says, we saw something. And I'm like, what do you mean you saw something? He goes, we wanna do more testing. He asked me if I had gotten into a car accident and if I'd damaged my breast area at all. I said, no, not at all, I'm a very healthy person. So he asked me if I could stay that day and get these 2 other procedures, which one was an ultrasound. It's like the next step after a mammogram. Then after that, it was a biopsy, which of course is so scary because you're thinking, this is serious now. We've gone through 2 other procedures and now this is it. This is what's gonna go to the lab to determine if I have breast cancer or not. And I remember thinking that whole weekend while I was waiting for my results, my boyfriend saying it's not breast cancer and I'm saying it is. And it's kind of like this female intuition. I think a lot of us that have gone through this think like, no, I think this is cancer. And I kept saying it was, and it wasn't trying to be negative. I just kind of felt it really deep down that something wasn't right. And I got the call from my doctor. I was driving. I was actually on my way to a radio event, and he told me that it was breast cancer. And really, that's all he could tell me. And I remember thinking, like, I couldn't hear like one thing around me. And I don't even know how I drove. And my boyfriend's bawling next to me. I did not cry, actually. I think I do a lot of crying now. But I remember thinking, this cannot be my life. And it's like you're falling into the center of the earth. And then so the next step is, how am I gonna beat this? And I knew at that point I had to go see a specialist and fight this. And that was my plan. I had the option to get a lumpectomy or to get a double mastectomy. And according to my breast surgeon, her name's Dr. Atai here in Los Angeles, she said I could have done a lumpectomy and been on my way, but I decided that I really didn't want to have to go through something like this. I didn't want to have someone tell me again that I have breast cancer, because I will still have breast tissue if I get a lumpectomy. So I decided to get a bilateral double mastectomy. I found this great surgeon, and Dr. Atai, and I also need a breast surgeon because, well, a plastic surgeon, because I did immediate reconstruction. I was not in a place to save my nipples. Most women don't. I believe there's only 2 surgeons in the country that do that. And it's a very difficult process, and in the long run it might not look so good. So I didn't save them, and I couldn't save them with the type of cancer I had. The type of cancer I had was in my milk ducts, so obviously there was no way for me to save my nipples. So I just remember, the day was December 13th, 2012. I'll never forget it. I was pretty numb in the morning. I just kind of went in like I knew what I needed to do. And I didn't shed a tear or anything like that. I just went in, got prepped for surgery, and knew, I was like, you know what, in 4 hours, this is gonna be over and I'm gonna be fine. That was the beginning of me beating cancer. In fact, at surgery, I was considered cancer-free, so. So after I recovered, it takes about 2 months to recover from a double mastectomy, I ended up going back to work and kind of leading my normal life. But of course, I kind of knew in the waiting, in the waiting, are you going to have to do chemo or not? And that's really what was, my next worry. So we did a couple of tests, and after a couple of tests, he decided that I really needed to do chemo. I had a form of aggressive breast cancer that they see in young women. It's called HER2. I was HER2 positive, but hormone negative. So with this HER2 positive, we're really lucky to have this drug now called Herceptin. It's a year-long process. Every 3 weeks, you get it through an IV, and that actually has no side effects. It's called targeted therapy. It's kind of the future of chemotherapy. So I wasn't really worried about that, but I was worried about chemo. And chemo for breast cancer is a tough one because you gain weight. So we always say, breast cancer survivors say, breast cancer is really hard because you lose your breast, you lose your hair, and you gain weight, like a woman's worst nightmare. But I went in, I did 6 rounds of chemo, and according to my oncologist, he says I was a rock star. And I was lucky enough I didn't gain any kind of weight, and I didn't have a lot of setbacks. But chemo is hard. Chemo is not easy. There were certain times where I got my energy back, and there were some days where I just had to lay in bed, and I just laid in bed. I just watched a lot of mindless TV, which was the advice of my oncologist. I was really achy all over. But it was interesting because you have that for about a couple of days, and then you're fine. And I actually worked through chemo, so I went back to work until my next round, and I kind of did that until I did 6 rounds. But as I got into my rounds, I was realizing that this was getting really tough on my body, and that, it was kind of time for me to stop working. So that's what I did. And I was really happy because July of last year, 2013, I got my last round of chemo, and I couldn't be happier. So I always say, you can't fight cancer alone. It's not just your doctors or yourself doing it all alone. You really need support. I mean, that is a huge part. I got so much support from the community. I was on the radio, so people just sent me things, made me things. I mean, I had people knitting me sweaters and something to cover my head because they knew I was going to be bald through chemo. People donated wigs to me. It was the most, I think I was really lucky to be on the radio and to get that kind of support, because I don't think most people get that kind of support. I really had the support of a community, and since I was raising money for breast cancer, those women just came rushing to me. I remember the day that I announced it on the radio, people just flooded my phone, and all day long, people I didn't even know, survivors I didn't even know. There were 25-year survivors just encouraging me, telling me it was going to be okay, offering me to come to support group, which I ended up doing, which I think is really helpful. Just to see these women. There were women that were 3-time breast cancer survivors that were fine. And they would talk to me about their chemo experience, and it was totally different than my experience. And again, I always just felt so lucky when I found my cancer and the time that I got my cancer, because we've just come such a long way. And losing your hair, for me, I was worried about that a lot, but at the end of the day, it was just hair. I really knew it was just hair. So I remember, my boyfriend and we went to the salon. She shaved my head for free. She was a cancer survivor, and she shaved it. She put my wig on. She taught me how to put this wig on and feel comfortable. The American Cancer Society has a really amazing program where it's called Look Good, Feel Better, where you can go and you can put on makeup, and they teach you how to put your eyebrows on because they fall off too, including your eyelashes. And you're really bare. I remember this one cancer survivor telling me that she felt most beautiful when she had cancer and going through chemo because she didn't have makeup, she didn't have hair, lashes, eyebrows. And she said that's when she felt the most beautiful. And I was like, wow, it's really inspiring. I think when you go through cancer, it's really important to have a diary. My oncologist said, you need to have a diary and you need to write all your feelings down. And so I did. throughout my process, and it's so interesting to go back because it was just like this woman in fear, you know, this scared of the unknown, like what's gonna happen. And it's nice to be on the other side of that, because there is a huge psychological thing that happens to you medically going into surgery. You're changing your body is not going to be the same, and just, you know, seeing people when you're in chemo. I mean, there's so many people going through so many different stages of cancer. It's uplifting, and at the same time it's just hard to watch sick people. It really is, and it's hard to watch yourself. I remember walking by mirrors in my house and going, oh my gosh, like who is this person? I was a girl that loved wearing makeup and always doing my hair, and here I am, just, I have none of it. But I thought it was always important to laugh, you know? Like I would giggle at myself and laugh at myself and say, oh my gosh, look at me. At least I don't have to spend money on hair products, or at least I don't have to worry about doing my hair, which is true. You really don't, and it saves a lot of time. I actually got ready quicker than my boyfriend, which is great for him. He was really happy about that. But psychologically, you take a toll, but I think as the days, the months, and I think the years go by, it gets better. And I've told my girlfriend who's going through this right now, I'm like, one day you're gonna have days where you're gonna forget about your cancer. You're just gonna have a normal day. And it's gonna be in your rearview mirror, and you're gonna be out there, you're gonna be inspiring people and talking to people and things like that. But the hardest part people don't really talk about is the year after all of this. It's been tough. You know, you're kind of a changed person. You are the same person you were before, but you're different in a sense. Like my oncologist says, he goes, you're Nicole 2.0. He's like, you're better. You're a better person. You've had this whole life experience to take you through. I always talk about, you know, when you see little kids, when they have cancer and you speak to them, they sound so mature and brave. And there's something that happens when you're staring death in the face and you're staring at your mortality and you're thinking, am I going to ever have babies? Am I going to get married? Am I going to get to that point? It changes you, and I think for the better. I think that you just appreciate life, and you appreciate all the little things that life has to offer you. I mean, I remember just walking around and just enjoying to see a green tree, or just seeing people happy, or just seeing the sun that day made me happy. It was the little things, and you know, because we get caught up in a lot of things. We get caught up in the way we look. Are we too skinny? Are we too pretty? Are we not? And it just brings you back down to earth to what's really important. You know, people always ask me, what have you learned from this experience? Well, you can write a novel on what I've learned, and every day I think I discover what I learned from this cancer. And I always kind of like check myself, like, hey, remember when you were sick, or remember this, remember that experience? And it always just brings me back down to, you know, what's really important. And through my journey, I've actually saved some people's lives. I know, I'm not saying that I'm like God or anything like that, but because of my journey, I've helped people get a mammogram. And through their mammogram, they discovered that they had breast cancer. They were also very young too. One of my girlfriends has the gene, and then she discovered after she has the gene that she also is a stage 1, you know, that she has stage 1 breast cancer. And they all say, you know, they would have never done those things if it wasn't for my story and for me getting diagnosed, because I have no family history. I'm a healthy person. I always took very good care of myself. So this was even more of a shock, which is even shows us we're so untouchable. You know, anything can happen to any of us. It doesn't matter what. We're all, you know, we're all the same people really going through life and just trying to do the best that we can. But I love this quote from Steve Jobs. He was the commencement speaker for Stanford, and he talked a lot about death because, as you know, he passed away from pancreatic cancer. But this was a quote: "Almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure. All these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. And it's so true. It's friends, it's family, it's being good to each other, it's loving each other. And that's really the ultimate lesson, that I learned. And I also learned something from my mom. Like, mom's always right, because she always said health is wealth. She used to tell me that since I was a little girl, health is wealth, health is wealth. If you don't have that, you can't go out to that party, you can't go on vacation, you can't do this. And she's right, health is wealth. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. Those are the biggest lessons, and I just want to continue to help and support other women that are going through breast cancer. And I was lucky enough to still be here, and so I just want to keep helping other women go through this process, because I know how hard it could be. And just every day is a blessing. I am Nicole Fruin, and I am a breast cancer survivor.